Story 1. People don't mess up their lives all at once. They mess it up one choice at a time. I'd get frustrated because he would say that to me for small things like sleeping in and missing class or not keeping my word about doing a certain chore. But it really is the accumulation of little things that can make or break your life. Story 2. If you are in front, check both ways before going when the light turns green. Sounds weird, green means go, except it costs 1 second to check both ways and it could cost your life if you get T-boned by someone running a red. It has saved me from an accident more than once, which makes all those seconds well spent. Story 3. My old man got me a summer job working at the manufacturing company where he was an executive. These were 4 10-hour days in a fabrication plant in Georgia during the summertime, with overtime on Fridays. By the end of the first week, I was physically exhausted. I rode with him every day, and at the end of the first week, he just glanced over and said, "Now you know what you don't want to do for a living, right?" I just nodded. He was correct. Edit. My grandfather was a maintenance yard supervisor at New York Central/Penn Central Railroad, and my old man drove spikes while he was a teenager. The job he got me was easy compared to that. He'll turn 83 this year, and I guarantee he can split wood better than anyone you know. He learned how to swing a sledgehammer. Story 4. Life isn't fair. You can cry about it or do something about it. He told me this when I was upset, saying life is not fair because I didn't get a job due to someone being the son of someone important. Story 5. Old mechanical stuff is cool. As a teenager and young adult, I was all about the next greatest thing, electronics, cars, whatever. I'm in my mid-30s now, and at some point, I pivoted into thinking antique items or a fully restored object are actually cooler in a lot of cases. I'm not talking about performance at the task at hand. A lot of older stuff is objectively worse in functionality, but there's more character involved somehow. Story 6. Your friend pool will slowly shrink as you get older. You don't understand how this makes sense at 25 or 26 when you're going on vacations together and seeing each other every week. Suddenly, couples break up or people get married and have kids, plans fall through a couple of times, and then people just stop trying. Story 7. The only thing I have to do is die and pay taxes. That's it. I hated that term, but he is right. It has actually helped me be able to let go and not be bothered by things out of my control. Story 8. My dad always told me when I was younger that if I had something trivial or small go wrong, I have 30 minutes to complain, vent, throw something around, etc. But when time's up, you need to move on because at the end of the day, life just doesn't stop. Story 9. My father used to say, "You should never expect anything from anyone. You're only going to get hurt." When I was younger, I thought that was the pinnacle of cynicism. But he was very much correct. Story 10. Me as a 17-year-old trying to find my way into adulthood. My dad, "You better hurry up and move out while you still know everything." Almost 30 years later, I've said this to many people since then. Story 11. There are a few. The lottery is a tax on the poor and stupid. During a manic episode last year, I was absolutely convinced I was going to win the Powerball and spend hundreds on tickets. No matter how fun or fancy, don't buy something when you don't have the money for it. And finally, don't bother arguing with someone who refuses to admit they were wrong. You'll waste your own and their time. Story 12. She has crazy eyes. I hated him for saying that, but in the end, that girl was crazy. I do not believe you can predict if someone is crazy based off their eyes, but it has been pretty accurate so far. Story 13. I used to think he was a bit of a loser for staying in a wood machinist job instead of always trying to climb higher. I'm 36 now, and I get it. He worked to live instead of living to work. I do the same. Story 14. You cannot ever go back home, meaning if you try to go back to where you are from, hoping that it will be the same and you will have the same friends, then you are sorely mistaken. Everything changes. Story 15. My dad said something like, "It is better to own things and not let them own you." I thought it was corny, but he was right. He was talking about investments, though it applies to most other things. Story 16. So many things. I'm 41 now, and I have a great relationship with my dad. When he was younger, he used to love to give me advice. Very basic things. Don't spend more than you earn, don't eat too much junk food, lift with your legs, and so on. He would say these things over and over again, and I hated it until I became independent and realized he was right about all of it. Story 17. Give with no expectation of return. When you catch yourself expecting, it's time to shrink your give. And the best relationships are the ones with no resentment. My dad never scorekept. I hope I can learn the same one day. Story 18. My dad struck me out in my Little League championship. The umpire didn't make it, and my dad volunteered. It was the classic situation. Bottom of the sixth, bases loaded, down by 1, 2 strikes, and 3 balls. All I needed was to get walked or a base hit. The pitch was high but in the strike zone. He could have called a ball and we would have won. But he was honest and called the strike. I was so upset with him. I lost friends on the team because of it. I was humiliated. I never played baseball again. However, it was the best life lesson I ever received and actually thanked him for it years later. He taught me the value of honesty and integrity. He taught me it's better to lose honestly than to win by cheating. It taught me life isn't always going to go your way, no matter how well connected you are. Story 19. I actually did start my career by walking into the office, shaking hands with the boss, and handing him my resume. I got an interview on the spot and started the next day. A computer numerical control machine company, and I was the entry-level automation engineer. This doesn't work for huge corporations, but will absolutely do for small businesses. That place only employed 10 people. Now I work at a large manufacturing company and make much more, but it all started at the small one. Even though I'm an engineer, this would definitely apply to skilled labor like welders, machinists, electricians, and so on. Many small fabricator shops are in need of that work too, so I'll give him credit for being right on. Just walk in and shake the boss's hand. Story 20. People will treat you differently depending on how much money you have, so you better work hard and earn big if you don't want people to treat you like you're nothing. Is it unfair and does it suck? Yes. Is it reality? Also yes. Story 21. This one's not very serious at all, but just a funny anecdote. My grandpa helped raise me when my dad died pretty young, so for most of my life he was my de facto dad. He retired and started doing a bunch of backyard projects. One of them was this fake front porch he built for his shed. He built a little awning and used it to display all of his old signs like vintage Coca-Cola signs, old street signs, and a rusty sign that says general store, that kind of thing. Well, the other grandkids and I used to tease him about it because he built a fake door on the front porch even though his shed obviously had a real door. But he wanted a fake door to make the porch on the side of the shed look real. We were like, why not just make the front porch on the side of the shed with a door? Well, then one night a guy gets into a hit and run while being chased by cops. He ditches the car and starts hopping over fences in my grandparents' neighborhood. He stops by my grandpa's shed and spends a couple of seconds yanking on the, you guessed it, fake front door my grandpa made. Apparently, those couple of seconds were enough time for the cops to catch up to him and tackle him. So, Pops, you were right and we were wrong. That fake front door wasn't all that silly after all. Story 22. His opinion on my first husband. Right before we were going to walk down the aisle, he told me, look, if you aren't sure about him, my car is right outside that door. We can just go. Your mother and I will handle everything. I should have listened. Although, everything that happened with the divorce of that husband led me to the fabulous guy I'm with now, whom they both adore. Story 23. Being totally agreeable or submissive with other people is the surest way to bring yourself hardship. People expect anger and combativeness at times. When they don't see healthy limits established, they assume general incompetence is the cause. Story 24. Get up and stop crying. You are fine, just keep moving. There was more to it that was situation specific, but looking back I needed that. From personal experience, I have met quite a few people who think this is a dumb perspective. Story 25. If you want to stay out and drink like a man, you still have to get up and go to work like a man. Maybe this applies less to drinking and working, but more to handling your responsibilities despite your previous poor choices. Story 26. He always told me, one day, son, you'll wake up and be 40. I never really took it seriously. I'm 42 now and wondering where all the time went. Sadly, he passed just before my 39th birthday, so I never got to tell him how right he was. Story 27. My dad used to say he couldn't get any good help around here, and he didn't produce gold bricks. He was right. My brother and I were terrible assistants at 6 and 8 years old, and we cost him a fortune too. Story 28. He was right for saying to spend less time on that smartphone back in 2010. Look at how society has degraded from constant smartphone usage now in 2025. Story 29. The best things in life are separate. In reference to not smoking marijuana at work or before school. I don't smoke marijuana at work, but I do smoke marijuana after work. Story 30. Minimalism is complete nonsense. I remember thinking that a lot of logos and building styles were too complicated and sometimes overbearing for no reason. Now, seeing the soulless corporate logos and plain white and gray buildings being constructed instead of the classic brick and decorative looks around my city, he was right. As a civil engineer, I hate admitting that he is right about style choices because it is technically easier to produce minimalist buildings and designs, but it gets so dull when it's all that gets built. I want some color and depth in my architecture here. Story 31. Every lesson he ever tried to teach me, he was right about. The one he repeated the most was the story of the grasshopper and the ants, and he definitely knew that was the story I needed to hear the most, and he was right. Story 32. My dad used to complain about too much unnecessary technology in things like cars and appliances. I thought he was crazy. The older I get, the more I realize he was absolutely right. I want something that works and will last. My refrigerator doesn't need an LCD screen. Story 33. Do yourself a favor and buy your dream television, stereo, and camera set before you get married. Once you're married, you spend all your money on stupid things like wallpaper and Fisher-Price junk. I'll be damned if he wasn't right. Story 34. Never buy a boat. The two best days of a boat owner's life are the day he buys it and the day he sells it. Times are tight financially, so go on Facebook Marketplace and see how many people are selling boats right now. Story 35. My mom was the wisdom dispenser in the family. She said nobody looks back on their life and says they wished they spent more time at work. And yeah, work is a means to an end. My grandfather told me that half the money you get paid is for putting up with nonsense. Bigger salary, more nonsense. I don't know if it's exactly true because school teachers exist and minimum wage jobs are full of nonsense. Still, I think there's some value to it. Like just the realization that you are being paid to put up with nonsense. You don't need to take that home with you when you're off the clock. Also, the expectation that career advancement comes with all new headaches. When you are making little, the money is worth it. But you can get to a point where more money isn't worth the headaches anymore. He ended up at a crossroads when it was either get out or become a vice president of a big corporation, and he chose to get out. I understand now. Story 36. My mom and dad have been divorced for 10 years now. Growing up, I had to listen to a bunch of nasty stuff from both sides. The worst part? They were both right about each other. They just failed to see their own wrongdoings. So yes, mom is an emotionally abusive control freak, and dad is an immature and sometimes violent jerk. Story 37. If you want to make money, you need one of three things. 1. Be smarter than everyone else. 2. Be willing to do things nobody else will do. 3. Work harder than everyone else. I'm not that smart, so I have to work harder than everyone else. He was actually pretty smart. He was just trying to drive it home. Story 38. In 2008 housing market crisis, he told my brother his condominium across the hall from mine was going to decrease in value and to stop paying his mortgage and save the cash for a year and a half until he gets legally evicted. I spent $10,000 fighting the association over a roof leak because I had made massive improvements to my space and it was mine. I lost and still got foreclosed on. I was out over $10,000 and my little brother saved over $10,000 in that time. Story 39. You are the company you keep. It's not literal, but you end up being very similar to those you hang around. And if you are actively friends with bad people, odds are you agree with them on the things that make them bad. Story 40. My dad's favorite expression for bratty kids was, "The only thing that kid needs is a swift kick in the ass." Recently, I saw a comedian say, "We don't spank our kids. I never would." Never. Ever. But my son has a friend whose parents do spank, and I gotta tell you, that kid is, man, that kid is the best behaved kid I've ever seen. Editor's note. If you don't know spank from abuse, kids aren't your thing, man. Story 41. Can't never did a damn thing. Not everyone will care about the same things you do, even if it means their downfall. Focus on you. Who cares what others think? Make your dreams become a reality. Even if you're in love, find someone who wants your dreams to come true. Story 42. Only you can control if you are having a good day. People and things will happen that will try to make you have a bad day, but only you have the choice in letting those things make your day bad. I get annoyed every time he tells me because he is so damn right. The days I am having a bad day are the days I am not doing anything to make it a good day. Story 43. You are judged by the company you keep, and we are also judged by the company you keep. I'm likely to have that talk with him soon regarding his politics.